think I will open the floor for further questions. We have a bit of time for questions. When you ask a question, please use the microphone so we can record your voice.
Okay, first I would like to thank the Prize for this wonderful lecture. And I think I really agree with you on most of the lecture, but I think I disagree a little bit on whether we are actually heading to a better future now, or do we have to wait for like 5-10 years till we start heading to that better future. I think that we are heading it now, and I have a few things, as an evidence for that. The first thing is that actually Egyptians are different from Egyptians like 4 years ago. So they will not actually let the dictator rule them with no question. That's one thing. The second thing is that actually the Sisi, who was probably the next president. I'm not a fan of Sisi, but I think that I foresee that he is coming the next president. I think that he probably realizes that actually people have need of things, and that he cannot just rule them with no reward. So he's smart enough. He probably would not be a total authoritarian, and he would actually play the game the right way. And I think that the third thing is that, like all the mechanisms that actually started the revolution 3 years ago, they are still in action. And we still have the media, we still have people are sort of mature, and maturity does not go back. Once people get matured, they cannot regress. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Everything in the scene, political scene in general, seems very, very bleak. Why should we even be optimistic? Everything around us just seems that everything is just turning around in a vicious circle again. Where's the light at the end of the tunnel again? That's my question.
Where's the tunnel? I got the question.
Thank you. I love the metaphors. I want to ask you something about Egypt. You talked about Egypt as if it's only Egypt. What about the external forces that play part in the future of Egypt, and how do you think that would be handled?
Thank you, Dr. First. In your Bab al-Khuruj, you predicted the war on terror somehow, and you predicted a huge number. There was a problem with the publisher. Do you still insist in your view about the number specifically?
Should I answer those four and then
okay. So we'll take a few questions, then we'll answer them, then we'll take other questions. So I think we'll stop now, and then we'll start.
I don't think we're in fundamental disagreement. You're more optimistic than I am, and I hope you're right. But my cautious is your optimism in the immediate term seems to rely on common sense as you see it. My problem is I have seen common sense too often ignored in the past 3 years, and I have no evidence that common sense is shared in the same way by the old and the new. My fear is the old Egypt still cling to its perceived ideas in the face of logic and empirical evidence. And perceptions are sometimes more important than quote-unquote reality. So if those in power, or who will be in power, are convinced that they can pull it off and go back to an authoritarian regime. They will at least try, and that will drag us in the mud for some time. But I hope to God that you're right and that my skepticism is exaggerated. On the other side, completely, the bleakness. Where's my bleak student? Of course, if you look, it depends where you look. If you are in the middle of the sea, or if you are in the mud, as I was saying, all you can see around you is bleak. But it's also our job as students and scholars, especially of political science and sociology and so on, is try to see a little bit beyond the immediate horizon that we have, which is not always easy, but I think it's a better way of assessing the importance of the immediate concerns that we have. So yes, the immediate could be bleak, but just around the turn, there could be something else. And my claim for the last 40 minutes is that there is a lot around the turn. Dr. Azoli, on the external forces, I have deliberately chosen to omit that, which is probably strange for someone with diplomatic background, but maybe also because I'm tired of it. But no, frankly, I think it's my view that, with all due respect to external forces, that their role is at best secondary. And I know this is not a shared view in Egypt, but I think from my very limited experience, what I have seen, and again, you know better than I, reality depends how you see it. So what I see is every time that local players had a clear vision and an agenda and knew what they were doing, they took the initiative and forced external forces to respond to that. Every time they were muddled, every time they give excessive importance to external forces, they actually create influence for external forces. So this is a long debate probably, and I'm sure external forces have a role to play and have an impact and all that, but I think the driving force is here. We might not hold the wheel, and then others would, but if those two dynamics operate, then, and we are holding the wheel and going in a direction, I think external forces will have no choice but to try to adapt, slow down, accelerate, and so on, but not dictate a path for what's happening here.
The numbers.
Numbers. Yes, the numbers. I'm sorry. The novel. The novel is, I have news for you, it's a novel. It's not a statistics book. So there are some crazy stuff in it. And then sometimes reality is even crazier than the fiction. I hope the numbers I put are excessive, as the publisher said, who's here, by the way. And I don't know if he had changed his mind about me being excessive. But we're doing pretty good on the numbers, and I hope we start calming down about that. Thank you all. I think it is not only a function of the two blocks, state establishment and the Islamists, understanding voluntarily that it isn't working. If you wait for that, it might never come. But they can be convinced only by political pressure and by consequences of failure. And all this is one side of the equation. The other side is for the so-called democratic bloc to organize itself. So it doesn't rely only, the future doesn't rely only on this, but also relies on that. And without that, this is unlikely to happen. And I think this clarification probably answers two other questions. Your question. Obviously, the old Egypt can find ways of passing its culture to younger people. It's not about age. So they can find others, and there are others, right? Social change, it's not a line. When you cross the age of 50, suddenly light comes in. So again, it's a political issue. If those who belong to this culture both in the democratic camp, but also those in the other blocs. If they manage to organize themselves within their blocs and take over, then the style of the game will change fundamentally. And I think this is likely to happen. But this is the optimist part. But analytically, I can think of a situation where they continue to be scattered, depressed, fly abroad, and so on, and then we continue in this mode for a longer period of time. But it seems politically, if you're planning a political program, and I'll come to the votes, if you're planning a political program, this seems to be the way where you can force your way in. We'll have to wait for the rest of the articles, I'm afraid, because that's another lecture. But you're right, your question is a good question, and I'm not saying this just to duck the question. I do truly believe that it's very important to get the right questions. And I think what I said at the beginning of that article is what makes me optimistic is that there is at least one group among all those lost souls who are asking the right questions. I am presenting my answers, but they're as good as any other answer. And as long as they're asking the right questions, as long as they're pragmatic and rational, it's very likely that they will find answers and build them and improve them and so on. Impact of state and the 90%. Impact of state institutions. I truly think this is going to be a fundamental challenge for any government to come, regardless of its political orientation. Partly why this happened, why this revolution started, is because state institutions are barely functioning. And they're not barely functioning because they're run by stupid people. They're barely functioning because it's an accumulation of dysfunctions over decades. We have a little bit less than 7 million people working in the public sector. That means about 28 million people depending on income from those salaries. And to change anything in this is very difficult and very necessary. How are you going to negotiate this? This is where political skill is required, and it will take time. But we will not even begin to cross this bridge until we get there. The 90% is obviously everyone's nightmare. 90% came and went in other countries. There were moments of fascism all over Europe and North America in the 30s. Situation got worse in certain places than others. And this is part of the unpredictability of it. So, again, my inclination is I have more faith that Egypt has changed too much to allow for this 90% to continue or to prevail. But this is my faith. I don't have reliable sociological studies to support this faith. We'll see how it goes. But I really can't see how the 90% could stay in the face of all these challenges and all the desire that is traversing the society. But I have colleagues who believe the 90% will continue. So,
take another batch of questions.
I can speak loud, waiting for the microphone.
I hear the mic.
I'm a pessimist, seeing the cup half empty, but I wish it was that situation. Illiteracy in Egypt, when Nasser made education from kindergarten to university, is now worse percentage-wise. 66% of women are illiterate, 44% of men are illiterate. In countries where everybody's going like a rocket, here it's like a turtle. And there's no way it's going to improve. I had a doorman in America, if I have a poem here, it's called Rich Man Families, which I happen to have, but it doesn't mean I'm rich, it just got both genders. And some people think they want males in China and Pakistan, they abort the girl until they get a boy. And even in Egypt, and the Middle East is conservative, the wife doesn't take the husband's name. So what's the thing that my son will have my name, whatever it is, they say Shukri, and all that crap.
Feshir.
Basically, I think Egypt, this is the optimistic need,
will advance to the rear in the next 60 years. And I mean, we are the only country in the world that one person had the three authorities in his hand. And you know the three authorities. And we're the only country that invented the glass sound insulated and the steel bars and put him and cut the sound. This is our advances. And the only country that buys in Ramadan from China.
I do.
They can't make Chinese speak Arabic. They make it in China.
Why can't the Democratic bloc get it together and get organized? Doesn't that seem to be kind of an essential question that's hinging on the 90% and which way it's going to go?
I'm wondering if the intelligentsia have become or made themselves totally irrelevant. Elites, I think, has become now a very unpleasant word in many ways. Perhaps partly accounts for the renewed faith in authoritarianism. Is there any role in the intelligentsia to see Bab al-Khuruj?
The middle here.
Dr. Isaac, it's not actually a question that I'm waiting for an answer, but it's some sort of analysis that has been stressing me a lot. And I want your opinion about it. Actually, I see what's happened for the blocs you mentioned, the Democratic or the Islamist or even the military bloc, which is coming nearly, are abusing us because very, very basic fundamentals. First, we've been living through a lot of lies concerning education, and because a lot of us maybe know pretty well that this is not actually Egypt. We are sitting here, Egypt is outside. And a lot of illiterate people, a lot of poverty, a lot of pain because of bread, and dreams being evaporated away. So each block of those actually abusing not only its bases but the others, trying to not to avoid the transparency they should deal with us with, just because, well, don't tell them the truth. They will not understand the truth. They may be terrified if they knew the truth. We know better. And this is, by the way, I think this is each block of them using the same method. So no one had ever had the guts to analyze the problem of raising wages, for example, which is unbelievable and basically could not happen that easily, because if you think of 3 million and you raise less than 1,200 and you want to raise it with 500 at most, at least, you will find that we need at least 17 billion a year, and you are not protected. Nobody, not on a TV, not on a university, not in any square, had come to the people and say, hey guys, you want to know the truth? Let's calculate. No calculation. But we can see a lot of actually deceiving in the court. This is actually what is going to let us stay in the mud for quite a while. Thank you. Do you think this might be right?
Cool. I have one more question.
Hi, thank you for the lecture that didn't only leave me with a thinking mode, but also left me with a sense of responsibility. I tend to believe in the circle of influence, so I have to do something. So what do you suggest that I do? I'm approaching 43, so I need to do something before approaching 50.
That's a cutoff line.
I'm not a student, I'm a worker, and I work among a society of in a multinational company with a lot of multinational people. people working together. So do you have a suggestion for someone like me that I can do to help the maturity of Egypt?
Dr. Feshir, if you may allow me to expand a bit on your metaphor and ask something related to that. Just to use a saying that's very known to all of us, there is no smoke without fire. So going back to your metaphor, there's no rain without clouds. So where exactly do you think the clouds go?
All right.
Okay, so just to rephrase my question quickly, do you think Egypt is in need of reform or revolution? And by revolution, I mean radical change. So, yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can also add one question. We've discussed there's lots of discussion of new and old Egypt. Nobody's discussing rural versus urban Egypt. And this revolution has a very strong undercurrent of rural Egypt. And nobody talks about it. So
thank you. 7 questions. Illiteracy and the other characteristics of the Egyptian society, I'm not going to question that. Those are basic statistical facts. But the question is, what do you do with them? What does this mean? So we have 40% rate of illiteracy. Then what does this mean for governments? Does it mean that those are ignorant people and therefore have to be ruled by an autocratic regime? Or does it mean that they don't read and write and that means their access is limited? I just read this morning in Shuru newspaper a statistic. I haven't verified the original, the source, but the statistics about, 27% or 17 or some, double-digit number in the United States do not know that the earth revolves around the sun. They still have a democracy. They had it for quite some time. And this is what Cromer was saying. This is my reference. So, yes, we're probably not ready for democracy perfectly, but no one is. The only way to get people is to get through it. But to get through it, you need safe ground rules so that it doesn't become something else. This is my thing.
My question to you.
All right. Why the democratic bloc can't get its act together, basically. And, of course, it's the question that we've been kind of suffering from. You have all the possible answers. You can get as many answers as people you ask. My answer is the following. Political leadership, what I call old Egypt, is not just those who were in government for 30 years. It's also those who were in opposition. A political system is not just those who are here. Even domination relations require consent of the dominating. So there is symbiosis between those and those. And this is also, as an Arab, this is about the intelligentsia. So in all modesty, or sadly, I think, yes, the intelligentsia is more or less irrelevant. And yes, the traditional elites of this society are irrelevant today. And this is one of the challenges. This is partly why organization is so difficult, because those belonging to the new Egypt have no experience in organizing themselves and so on. And the tasks of organization in a democratic regime are very different from those in an authoritarian regime. The skills required are different, and so on. So my short answer is it will take time, and it's not going to happen with existing leadership. I think I answered your question as well. Now, there is just, I was reading a book by Mario Vargas Llosa, and he was writing about his electoral campaign as a presidential candidate. And he said one of the myths about authoritarian regimes is that the elite, the so-called cultural circles, provide a reservoir of independence and freedom, that when the autocrats fall, those elites become the beacon of light. And he said this is complete nonsense. In his view, at least in the example he used, in his case, in Peru, the leading cultural circles were part and parcel of the authoritarian regime. They lived off it. Even those who opposed it lived off this opposition. And this, they defined the role for themselves. So when the autocrat goes away, they're lost as well. Yes, the Assam, not telling truth is not unique to Egyptian politics, I'm afraid. There was a student of mine, I'm teaching Introduction to Political Science this semester, and I, in the first session, asked students, what do you think politics is? And one of students who, like to sit in the rear and come with no notes and so on, said, well, politics is about lying to the people. It's how you perfect the art of manipulating the people. And in fact, manipulation is part of the exercise of power. So there is that. But I agree with you that it might be excessive in cases that, in certain cases. The beauty of what's happening in Egypt is that this isn't working anymore. You can, but it doesn't work. You can't continue to tell people, elect me president, and in 100 days I'll fix the traffic. It's just 100 days pass, and then you look bad, and so on. So, and we are facing serious economic challenges. So the lying stuff is not, or the manipulation stuff is not, can take you only so far. So without being necessarily very honest or kind of focused on integrity, politicians, for practical reasons, if elections continue to be there, if they have to run to contest office, will have to start telling basic facts to the people. Yes, last two questions. What to do? I think two quick answers. One, the fact that you're asking this question, while you really don't have to worry about that, is an indication of what I'm talking about. And the fact that I'm sure you're a unique person, but you're not the only one asking this question, is also an indicator. I have my answers, and I'll continue to say what those answers are, but my answer is as good as the other. So all of us eventually will find ways of linking. That's the essence of organization, is to be part of a network. The network could be doing anything. It could be teaching IT to kids in difficult neighborhoods, or not in difficult neighborhoods, schools, whatever. But ultimately, the fact that we are in networks makes a huge difference from just sitting at home, getting depressed on Facebook and so on. Lastly, rural Egypt. There are two weak points in my thesis and in my presentation. One is, I pointed to, that the absence of rigorous sociological measurement of the depth and breadth of social change. The second is rural Egypt. And I have my own remarks from talking and traveling and listening and so on. And it's surprising how much rural Egypt is actually part of what's happening and sometimes leading what's happening. The Dastur Party, when Dr. Muhammad Baradei and others established the Dastur Party, their problem in the first number of months, was that they were continuously receiving phone calls as follows. People calling from, yes, I am the Secretary General of the Dastur Party in Bani Suef. And no one knows who's this guy. No one, we don't even know that he is. We do have a branch in Bani Suef, we don't. People were organizing themselves spontaneously. They like the idea, and then they rent an apartment, they put a banner on it, they call themselves the party, and they are looking for the center to kind of give us guidance. What shall we do? And this was not an of course, the party failed miserably in building on this energy, but the point is, the energy is there, those people are there. The idea that politics is kind of a city boys story is just a myth that we need to get beyond.
Thank you, Ezzedin, for sharing. I think this has taken longer than we should have taken. It's been a very nice debate, a very deep-rooted debate into what's happening in Egypt. Looking forward to see you in the next Provost lecture series. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.